Show someone a blurry, ambiguous image with no context, and they may perceive it as random noise. Tell them beforehand that it depicts a Dalmatian dog, and the same exact image suddenly resolves into a clearly visible dog, seemingly instantly and irreversibly. This dramatic shift reveals that perception is never purely a bottom-up recording of raw sensory data. It is always shaped by expectation, knowledge, and context flowing down from the brain's higher-level processing. Bottom-up processing describes perceptual analysis that begins with raw, elementary sensory data. Individual features including edges, colors, and basic shapes detected directly by sensory receptors, and progressively builds this raw data upward into increasingly complex perceptual representations and eventual conscious recognition, proceeding data first without relying on prior knowledge, context, or expectation to guide or bias the initial analysis of incoming sensory information, essentially processing the world exactly as it is objectively received by the sensory receptors. Top-down processing describes perceptual analysis that is actively guided and shaped by higher-level cognitive factors, including prior knowledge, expectations, context, and motivational or emotional state, which influence and bias how incoming, often genuinely ambiguous sensory information is initially interpreted, meaning the same objective sensory input can be perceived quite differently depending on what the perceiver already expects, knows, or is specifically looking for at that moment, demonstrating that perception is an active, constructive process rather than a purely passive recording of external reality. Perceptual set refers to a specific mental predisposition or readiness to perceive ambiguous stimuli in one particular way rather than another, based on prior experience, immediate context, expectation, or motivational state, classically demonstrated through experiments in which the exact same ambiguous drawing is perceived as either an old woman or a young woman, or as either a duck or a rabbit, depending substantially on which specific interpretation the viewer was primed to expect, immediately beforehand, or on the specific context in which the ambiguous image is initially presented. Context effects demonstrate powerfully that surrounding stimuli and overall situational context substantially shape the interpretation of an inherently ambiguous individual stimulus. A classic demonstration shows that an identical ambiguous character can be readily perceived as either the letter B or the number 13, depending entirely on whether it appears within a sequence of letters or a sequence of numbers, with the identical raw visual sensory information producing a completely different conscious perceptual interpretation purely as a function of its immediate surrounding context. Reading provides a compelling, everyday demonstration of bottom-up and top-down processing working seamlessly together. Bottom-up processes analyze the basic visual features of individual letters, while simultaneous top-down processes, drawing on knowledge of vocabulary, grammar, and sentence-level contextual expectation, allow readers to quickly recognize words despite typographical errors, missing letters, or unusual fonts, and to correctly resolve genuinely ambiguous words based on surrounding sentence context, explaining why proofreading one's own writing is notoriously difficult, since strong top-down expectation of the intended words can cause a reader to perceive text as correct despite actual errors present in the bottom-up visual input. Expert perception across specialized domains, including radiologists detecting subtle abnormalities in medical images and chess masters instantly recognizing meaningful board configurations, relies substantially and increasingly on top-down processing built from extensive domain-specific learned experience and pattern knowledge, allowing experts to perceive meaningful structure and relevant anomalies in complex visual information far more rapidly and accurately than novices, whose comparatively limited top-down domain knowledge forces greater reliance on slower, more effortful bottom-up analysis of the same raw visual information. Bottom-up and top-down processing together reveal that human perception is never a simple, passive recording of objective sensory reality. It is an active, constructive process in which raw sensory data is continuously and seamlessly integrated with prior knowledge, expectation, and context to produce our actual conscious perceptual experience of the world.